What you need to know is that salvation is by faith and faith alone in Jesus Christ. And faith alone in Jesus Christ is preceded and followed by repentance. A turning away from sin, a hatred for the things that God hates and a love for the things that God loves. A growing in holiness and a desire not to be like Britney Spears, not to be like the world, and not to be like the great majority of American Christians, but to be like Jesus Christ. I don't know why you're clapping. I'm talking about you.
Worship Christ because He's God. He's not like God. He's not close to God. He's not almost God. Jesus Christ is God.
Once I turned to Jesus and I realized how He had changed my outlook on life, not just softball, but understanding how much I have to live for, and that's living to exemplify the kingdom.
The Holy Spirit's in Elijah. The Holy Spirit's in Elisha. The Holy Spirit's in John the Baptizer. The Holy Spirit is in Jesus Christ. The Holy Spirit is in you if you belong to Jesus.
Let me have Christ whether I'm sick or well. Let me have Christ whether I'm rich or poor. Let me have Christ whether I'm alive or dead. Let me have Christ for my sins, and Christ for my guide, and Christ for my power, and Christ for my king.
Hey guys, it's Monday night and we're back here for episode 13 of the Bible Lens podcast, and it is just me here for tonight. I think C.S. Johnson might be joining us here later on in the show, but for right now it's just me. About 30 minutes ago I was made aware of a situation involving a couple of our guys who are our normal regulars here on the show. I don't really know much about what's going on in the situation, but let's just say that pray for a good outcome right now, because there's definitely some people who need it. So outside of that beginning, I'm just going to be go ahead and going pretty hot here on the show tonight, because there is a few things that I wanted to talk about, and this is an important topic, and it is an important topic that we need to discuss here. And as you know, we've been doing the last few weeks a series of Do Not Love the World, which comes from 1 John 2. And it's a series based on the things that are in the world today that remove us or separate us from God, whether it's God's obedience, God's love, or just God in general. And we started this thing off a few weeks back. We were talking about, how the worship and the obsession with money leads to envy, to anger, to strife, into other things that are not good. And then last week we went into more detail about, discord, about how a lot of the facets of our society is meant to divide us and meant to have one person go against another person and have us all hate each other, which is obviously not biblical. It's not what God wanted. It's not what God tells us to do, but it's the way the world is. So for this episode here, we're going to talk about the sins of lust and sexual immorality. And we're talking about a multitude of problems that are very, very strong in our society right now, that are very, very prevalent in our society right now. So I think a good way to, start this whole thing off is that we should start off kind of with our central, you can say, focus here on this series, which is called Do Not Love the World. And I'll go ahead and bring this up here in just 1 second. Here we go. Want to make sure that that's off there for a second. So I can see here, this is 1 John chapter 2, 15 through 17. It says, do not love the world. Do not love the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And for that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but of the world. And of this world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. So we've been focusing on this particular passage here for a few weeks now, and it's mostly focused on the idea of what this passage is trying to say is that the world is very, very wicked. It's a fallen world, and it's not particularly our fault. I mean, this is something that happened before any of us were ever on this world, but we were born into a fallen world. And because of that, because of who actually runs this world, we're basically in a trap of sinfulness. And it's a sinfulness not just of one sins, but of many, many sins that pull us away from God, that try to separate us from God and essentially try to assure our own damnation here. So Kate's joining us here. Say, is that Dan Blazarian on the thumbnail? Yes, it is, and we will bring him up here later on the show because this is pretty important here. Duke Nukem also joining us tonight, saying the horror of Babylon. Yeah, not particularly in that same context, but we're going around the same lines here. So I want to go ahead and bring this back up here. Then we'll kind of get to the nooks and crannies of this one. Now, this is one of my most powerful verses in the Bible because I think in every Christian's life, there has to be a conviction point to make them understand that they're not exactly as good as a person as they believe to be. And I think we're in a world that deceives us into thinking that we're good people by nature. Yet when we actually weigh our lives versus the weight of sin and the judgment of sin, we realize that we're not really as good as people as we think that we are. And this is Galatians chapter 5, 19 through 21. Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envies, murder, drunkenness, revelries, and which are like I tell you beforehand, as I told you in the past, those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. So if you look at this list here, if you are guilty of any of these things that are on this list, and you have not found Jesus Christ, you are currently under the wrath and judgment of God. That's the way that we view the world. So if you're someone who's committed adultery, fornication, idolatry, practices witchcraft, has anger problems, is a heretic, envy, a murderer, drunkenness, any of these things that are on this list, unless you get right with God, then you are under his wrath because you are guilty of these things. And a lot of people, I know if you guys are familiar with Ray Comfort, he's a guy who's on YouTube. He does a lot of like street ministering, street preaching, and he goes up to people. He pretty much asks them, hey, have you ever told a lie in your life? Have you ever told a lie? Have you ever did anything murder? Have you ever been sexually immoral? Have you ever, like I said, he'll basically go through the 10 commandments. It says what it says in the 10 commandments. Don't steal. Don't kill people. Don't covet your neighbor's stuff. Don't lie on your neighbor. Follow the Sabbath. Don't have anything before me. There's a multitude of things out there. And if you're guilty of these things, you're guilty in the eyes of God. And unless you accept the free gift of Jesus Christ, which is salvation, which is accepting the gospel of Jesus Christ, that he is in fact the Son of God, that he came here in the flesh to die for the sins of man. He was crucified, he died, he was resurrected, and all he's asking in return after everything he did for us is you to believe in him, believe in his message, and you shall be saved from the wrath of God. That's kind of the whole point of the series that we're talking about here. We're talking about the gospel of Jesus Christ and how one gets saved, despite the fact that, look, a lot of people struggle with sin, not the same sin, but look, a lot of people will struggle with sexual immorality. A lot of people will struggle with envy. A lot of people will struggle with anger. A lot of people will struggle with a multitude of different things. Not everyone's the same, but everyone struggles with something. That's just the way that we are. And we look for ways to get past these sins that are pretty much taking control of us. And the only way to do that is through Jesus Christ, through God incarnate. So what we're talking about here tonight, part 3 here, is that there is a sin of lust that has engulfed the entire world. and it's been around for a very, very long time. If you go back to the stories of, let's say, Sodom and Gomorrah, I'm pretty sure you guys have mostly heard this story before, but back in the early times, let's just put it that way, there was a little town, let's just call it that, called Sodom and Gomorrah as well. And this was a place that was known for its wickedness, its immorality, all across the board. This is a place that, folk that, had a lot of issues with, sexual immorality, orgies, homosexuality. They were very wicked towards each other. They were very unkind towards one another. They were very uncaring of people. And it was a very, very wicked place. And it got to a point where God had essentially decided that if we allow these people to continue at the rate that they're going, that they're only going to produce more people who are going to be destined for eternal damnation. And if you go and you read the Old Testament, and this is why one of the things that I hate about some of these new preachers that you hear about, like Andy Stanley and a few others, is that they want to adopt this idea that we need to detach ourselves from the Old Testament. If you're a Christian, detaching yourself from the Old Testament is a very, very, very dumb and borderline evil idea, because there's so much context in the Old Testament to make you understand how exactly we got to this very point to begin with. And a lot of our issues are told in the Old Testament that gives us better context of what we're dealing with here today. And yeah, if you've heard the story of Genesis, essentially what happened is that God sent a couple of angels to remove Lot and his family out of Sodom before he destroyed it. And then, of course, the people of Sodom tried to rape the angels who were leading them away. Now, of course, the angels blinded them, and so they couldn't find where they went. And then once Lot's family were removed from the area, God smited them quite literally to ash. And I find this very funny, too, because there's archaeologists now who are trying to figure out like what happened during that time period where Sodom is found today. And they discovered recently that they believe a blast took place that was more powerful, several times more powerful than like the biggest atomic bomb we have in our arsenal today. The only problem with them trying to, I guess, rationalize this is that obviously no such technology existed in those times that would create such a powerful blast. This is not just a run-of-the-mill fire that engulfed the town. This is a literal blast that wiped the town away. People are thinking, what could have possibly caused this? And, well, I mean, it's pretty obvious who exactly caused it, and that's why they have such a hard time trying to deny that it actually happened. But I'm going to go through a couple of Bible verses here, because we're going to, like I said, really sell this idea of the dangers of sexual sin and why exactly our world has fallen into sexual sin here as well. And Duke actually answered the question here. It says, wait, are angels' body non-physical? No, some of them have heavenly bodies, but if, like I said, if you really get deep into the book of Genesis, there's a couple of instances where angels, even fallen angels, did in fact have physical bodies, and that did cause very big problems in our world. Let's just put it this way, Duke, if you haven't heard the story. I'm pretty sure you've heard the story of the flood, when God drowned the earth, and then as a result, a lot of people died during that time frame. Let's just put it this way. That flood happened for a reason, and it's a reason that too many people don't talk about, but it's a reason that was, let's just put it this way. Every time God has intervened personally with us as a world, as a people, he does it for a very, very good reason. So I want to go through a couple of Bible verses here just real quick and kind of really sell the idea of what we're talking about here. So I can get the screen up here just for a second. We're going to start off with Matthew, and this is Jesus talking about the sin of adultery. Now, a lot of people just assume that adultery is when you decide to, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cheat on my wife. I'm going to sleep with another woman, or I'm going to be physically, what's the term I'm looking for? It's not infidelity, but basically I'm gonna cheat on my wife. I'm gonna cheat on my girlfriend and sleep with another person. But what Jesus did here is that he took that commandment of do not commit adultery and took it a step further. And this is what he said here. He says in Matthew chapter 5, 27 through 30, you have heard it here said to those of old, you should now that you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, whoever looks at a woman with lust in her, whoever lusts for her, has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is more profitable for you to perish, for that member to perish, than for your whole body to be cast into hell. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. It is more profitable for one of your members to perish than your whole body to be cast into hell. So what exactly is Jesus saying here? And this is a big problem with the Jewish leaders of this time who followed the old law of Moses, the Ten Commandments, is that during this time period, obviously the Ten Commandments were viewed as the Jewish law. But what Jesus did is that he essentially took the Ten Commandments, took it a step further and codified it. He said that you heard it said to you, don't commit adultery, which means don't sleep with other women if you're married. But I say to you, if you even look at another woman with lust in your eyes, you've already committed adultery with her. And what he's saying is that it's not just the physical act that is sin, it is the thought that is sin. Why? Because the thought leads to the physical act. So if you're lusting over another woman who's not your wife and you don't control that lust that you have, it's only going to be a matter of time before you fall and commit adultery as a result of this. And this is essentially what he was saying here. And he was saying, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Now, that doesn't mean you have to quite literally rip out your entire eye and throw it out of you. I know that a lot of Catholics like to play the literal game when it comes to certain verses of the Bible. But if you're literally going to rip off your own eyes, that's obviously going to be a problem for you. But what he's saying here is that if there is something in your life that is causing you to stumble, that is causing you to sin, you need to remove that out of your life entirely. Because at the end of the day, if that sin leads you to hell, is it more profitable for you to just cast that thing out of your life and gain salvation down the line, or to continue in that sin and then essentially be thrown into hell as a result? It's kind of the idea that we're getting here. I do want to jump in one of our persons who's patiently waiting for us right now. So let's see if we can jump in. Samantha, how you doing today, Sam?
Oh, I'm swell. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, pretty well at the moment. Duke Nukem has another question for her. What about the archangels? Yes, I believe in the Bible there's only 3 archangels that are listed here. Obviously, that's Gabriel, that's Michael, and then that's Lucifer, who was the fallen angel, aka Satan, who fell from heaven after he tried to rebel against God. And I think which one? It's blanking. It was right off the tip of my tongue there, but yeah, obviously, as we know, Lucifer caused the angels to fall in heaven. Then he fell down here to earth as well. We've had Michael, the archangel Michael, show many seeds of faith as well. And here's basically kind of the feeling behind this. It's that I know a lot of people think of like angels as so a lot of people's depiction of angels are like, oh, these heavenly beings, and they're like babies and whatnot, and they have harps and they have like that's not like biblical angels. Just telling you like this right now. Every single angel, especially the archangels, are all messengers from God. They're used to essentially be, I don't want to say a mediator, but they're there to relay a message from God to us, the people, humans. And yes, there are definitely angels out there that have physical bodies, and because there are physical living beings in the spiritual realm. Obviously, we can't see them because we're not in heaven for the obvious reasons. But yes, there are angels out there that do have many forms, and they have many forms because God created them to have many forms to present to us. Yeah. I agree. Adultery is punishable by death and stoning in some places in Sharia law. Yeah, I know adultery is a very serious offense. I mean, it used to be a very serious offense here in the West. It depends on where you are. And in a lot of places, I think there's very few states that still have laws on the books against that specific practice. But yeah, I know obviously in Sharia law, you're killed. I mean, obviously in the Old Testament, it says that if a person commits adultery, that person should be killed. That was the way that Jewish law worked back in the time when they were following the Old Testament of God. So that's a very, very older reference too. But here in the West, you typically don't do that, and maybe that's for the worse. We'll talk about that later on here. But Sam, before I answer Tactus Jones' question here, we're basically talking about lust, giving like a quick little run through about what we're talking about here. So since you are here now for the show, I want to ask you this question real quick. What do you think is the world's or society? Let's put it this way. I'll ask you plainly. What do you think is society's biggest problem with lust right now?
It's very, like, things that would cause you to lust are very accessible. I was talking about this with my sister the other night. Like, used to be, if you wanted to go buy like a porn magazine, you would have to like go to the store, get in your car, and do all this effort. And nowadays we have these cool little things called iPhones, Androids, I don't discriminate, where you can just look it up on the internet and it's right there. And then TikTok, you got all those girls with their booty dancing, you know, everything kind of seems set up to lust, and it's become so, like, people have become so desensitized to that kind of material that they don't really think twice before they indulge in lust. So I think it's worse than it's ever been, probably. Maybe not ever, but it's up there.
I think there's an argument that you could say about ever, but like I said, we'll make that case throughout the course of this show here. So I'll jump over to 1 Thessalonians 4. This is 1 through 5. This is the plea for purity. And it says, "Finally then, brethren, we urge you and exhort the Lord Jesus Christ that you shall abound more and more, and just as you received us, how you ought to walk and please God. And for that, the commandments that we gave you through the Lord Jesus, for this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you would know that you will abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor, and not in the passion of lust, like the Gentiles who do not know God." So this is very important. I talked about this with Sodom and Gomorrah, where we're kind of explaining the whole story behind them and why Sodom and Gomorrah literally had to be smited out of existence. So very, very important things here. We keep going here now concerning things that I forgot to bring up the verse. This is our 1 Corinthians 7. This is verses 1 through 9 here. I'm just going to go to a quick little rundown. Now concerning the things that you wrote me, it said, "It is good for a man to not touch a woman, nevertheless because of sexual immorality. Let each man have a wife, and let each woman have a husband. Let the man render to his wife the affection due to her, and likewise the wife to a husband. The wife does not have the authority to her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves, it said that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and coming together again, so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of control. But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment. For I wish that all men, even as I myself, but as each one has his own gift from God, and one in this manner, and another in that. But that I say to the unmarried, to the widows, that it is good for them to remain even as I am. But if they do not exercise self-control, let them marry, for it is better for them to marry to them burn with passion." So what's being explained here is that when it comes to sexual passion and sexual, I guess, lust, you can say, it's a part of human nature. That's really what it comes down to. We all have sexual desires, and we all have sexual desires that for a lot of people are very, very hard to control. So the way that we were meant to control these sexual desires is to go out there and find a mate, to get married, so that way we can have share our sexual desires with that person, rather than going around and just sharing it with the entire world. I know there's a few people out there who try to use this con that, well, the Bible doesn't explicitly say that, that sex before marriage is a bad thing. Now that's not explicitly say that. Try to find a way to justify that. It's one of the dumbest arguments that I can ever heard in my life. Like, really, all you have to do is just read the Bible. If you believe that sex before marriage is fine, but somehow once you get married you can't have sex outside of it, that defeats the entire purpose of like I said, allowing sexual desire to be burned in the marriage in the first place. So people who try to deceive you like that by saying, well, it's not explicitly said, like, yeah, it is. Like, it goes into very, very good detail about what fornication and sexual immorality is. So do not fall for that lie whatsoever. Oh, there I am. Well, I didn't even know from the picture.
I felt very alone out here.
On an island by yourself there. So I can talk about a couple more verses, but kind of the idea that we're getting here, that sexual immorality is pretty much anything that is sex outside of a married man and a married woman. Anything outside of that is considered sexual immorality. So it doesn't matter if it's homosexual sex, if it's just a man and a woman having sex outside of marriage, multiple partners, all that stuff. If you're not married to a husband or married to a wife and you're having sex, you're in sin. That's just the way that it is now. Now, there's so many ways that our world is set up to, I guess, prop up this very, very dark sexual sin that has really consumed the world over the last few years. And the question is, how did it get this bad? And my pinpoint, and I think a lot of people's pinpoint, is in fact the sexual revolution of the 1960s, right? Now, back in the 1950s, and Sam, since you're here and you're a lady, I'm gonna get your perspective on here. When you look at the mainstream culture, let's just put it that way, the mainstream culture of society, the 1950s is always portrayed extremely negatively in today's society, and especially portrayed negatively for women, because the idea is that back in the 1950s, where, you know, women were married to a husband and they weren't going around sleeping with a bunch of men. They were at home. They were taking care of the kids. They were running the house. The man was going out there providing, doing work and stuff like that. And there was this movement that was growing at this time saying that, well, this shouldn't be all that women have to do. We need to be out there in the workforce. We need to be allowed to be more sexually free. You know, this whole chastising that you guys are doing during this area, it's like we need to rebel against this. So that's what, I guess, led to the sexual revolution of the 1960s. And let me just ask you a quick question, Sam. What is, as a woman, what has been your portrayal of the 1950s? What have you thought about that time period, based on what you've heard from others, what you generally believe about that time period?
Seems wholesome and not perfect. Was there ever a time in American history that was perfect? I'd venture to say no. But I like that women could just stay home with the kids instead of two people having to work. That's a different story. Like, I don't think about it a lot, like from a sexual perspective, I guess. My oh man, I'm about to out my grandma here. My grandma was born in the 1930s, went to college in the 1950s, and found out what sex was through like a biology book that she read in college with her roommate Patsy, which I think is adorable. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't something that was talked about, you know, like nowadays it's so accessible. Back then, you'd have to wait till you were in college and found access to a biology book.
That used to be the way that things were going. And I mean, society for the most part was actually going on pretty well at the time, but that has completely changed as time has continued here over the last several decades, because like I said, the 1960s came along and we pretty much smashed that entire patriarchal oppression that they used to say with a hammer. And it all became about, you know what was that old Baphomet saying, do as thou wilt? Or no, that's Aleister Crowley. That's Aleister Crowley who used to say that.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, generally the idea is like, just do whatever you want to do, and that was the feeling that pretty much culminated to 1960. So people just started, hey, you know what? Screw marriage. Just have as much sex as we want. Let's just start doing as many drugs as we want. And at that moment, the moral fabric of our society fundamentally changed throughout the course of time, and it hasn't been for the better. So I'm gonna bring this up here for a second, because this might be a little bit surprising to some of you people, but This is a little chart that I wanted to bring up here. Hopefully you guys can see it just real quick. I'll pull it up just a little bit more so you guys can get a look at it. This is the distribution of women's premarital sex partners and by marriage cohort. So this is essentially kind of a chart breakdown here, a study that shows exactly how many partners women slept with during the time of 1970s to essentially where we are right now. Now, in the 1970s, now keep in mind, the sexual revolution was already in full swing at this point. But if you see here from this chart, the overwhelming majority of women in the 1970s had only slept with one partner. 43% had only slept with one man their entire lives, and that was largely their husbands. So that was kind of the standard at the time, even though this is a time period where, like I said, the sexual revolution and a lot of this feminism and liberalism had already started to take a big hold during this time period, but that was still the standard. As time went on, that started to change. Now, the idea of a woman who slept with 10 people back in that time was unheard of. At the time, only 2% of women had done that, right? So this is kind of the standard that we're going off of here, anywhere between 1 and 10. Now, 21% were also virgins at the time, keeping in mind in that number. Fast forward to the 1980s, and you're starting to see a downtick. You're starting to see all of a sudden that women aren't holding on to their virginity as much. They're starting to sleep around a little bit more. So the number of women who started to sleep with 3 or more partners went up from 8 to 11%, and then 4 to 5, I should say, from 6 to 12%, doubled in just 10 years. Then you jump ahead to the 1990s, and then this is where it really started to explode. This is when, if you guys old enough to remember, that was like the MTV spring break era of all this whole thing. So that was back when everyone just got into a bikini, went to Florida, and did God knows what. But listen to this. The number of women who had only slept with one partner got cut in half in just 20 years. It went from 43% to 26%. The number of virgins went down from 21 to 14. And all of a sudden, the amount of women who slept with 3 to 10 partners all were in the double digits. You look for here, 3%, 3 partners, 11%, 4 to 5, 16%, 6 to 9, 11. And then all the women who slept with 10 or more partners, 10%. So that's like 5 times as many as 20 years earlier. So now you're starting to see the effect really take toll. And now you jump ahead here to the 2010s, and then this is where the numbers become almost astronomical. The amount of women who actually remained virgins went from 21 from the 70s to 5%. The amount of women who only slept with one partner, their husbands, went from 43 to 22%. And all of the higher numbers, the 5 to 9, the 4 to 5, the 6 to 9, and 10 plus, astronomical. 18%, 4 to 5, 14%, 6 to 9, and 10 plus went from 18%. So it was only 2% 40 years ago, and now it's at 18%. And I bet you if we start taking numbers of the 2010s, it's much, much higher now. So what it's saying here is that based on the way that modern women are here today, it is extremely hard to find a virgin out there. Like, if you're honestly trying to find a virgin, you might have to find someone who's like 15. Like, that's your best hope of finding someone who's actually holding on to their...
What's the age sample here?
I don't know if it shows it here in this one. I think it's mostly going off of partners, but I can look a little deeper and see if there was an actual
Like
specific
married
age
people?
range. Yeah, because I'm assuming here if you're talking like mostly married people, is going to be an older sample size here. But yeah, I'll have to get the exact numbers of that self-reported one to see what was the age range reported. But it's just basically going off of general partners, like how many have you slept with throughout this time period. So as you can see here, those numbers have been skyrocketing here for decades. Now, here's the problem, and this is what's going to lead into the big conversation here. Is that based on every single study, every single research paper, and when you're talking about the happiness of marriage, the quality of marriage, how long people are married, this is the number that pretty much blows everything out of the water. If you are married to a woman who has slept with at least 10 partners, at least 10, so
I'm not,
I know there's
thank
people...
gosh.
I know there's people out there who have gone far higher. I'm just saying at least 10, which is still pretty high, all things considered, right? Your chances of getting a divorce are nearly 80%. if she slept with more than 10 people in her lifetime. Now, we're in a world now that kind of normalizes this idea of women, especially very, very young women, sleeping with as many people as they want. And this is something that's been popularized in our society for a very, very long time. Sam, I'm not sure if you're old enough to remember a little show called Sex and the City, but that was a pretty big show at its time period during like the late 90s, early 2000s, won multiple Grammys, Emmys, and Golden Globes. It was like the big show at the time there. And it was about 4 women, older women who are just out and about in New York City, sleeping with as many men as they possibly can. And hopefully one day at the very, very end of the show, they might have found that one person that they can settle down with. And a lot of women identify with that show. A lot of people took a lot from that show. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that this is all Sex and the City's fault, because as you can see from the graph here, this started way before Sex and the City. But this idea of it being popularized on a mass scale has only increased, especially over the last 20 to 30 years. And now you see that the numbers are going astronomical here. So I got a few videos here of people openly talking about how many people that they have slept with in their lives. And the numbers are pretty crazy when you get to it. But first, I'm going to go ahead and play this video, because this is a group of women talking on a podcast here about how many men who they've slept with. And then don't want to start there. You know what? I'm gonna start. I'm gonna change this up here, because this actually flows a little bit better if I do it like this. I'm gonna play this video. This video is essentially people trying to guesstimate the average number of women average number of men that young women have slept with, and then we'll progress it from there, because I think it'll sell it a little bit better if I do it like that. So let's go here. This is a show, I think it's like Fresh and Fit or something like that, but I have a bunch of women here, and he's basically asking the women the question, what do they believe is the quote-unquote average number of men that women have slept with during this time period? So I'll let it go here.
We'll start right here and then work our way.
On average, I think it's
25-year-old girl, went to college, has a job.
It's in that 20 to 50 range, somewhere in that. I know.
20 to 50 bodies?
Yeah.
She said, what about you?
I would say the same,
Because I just looked this stat up.
20 to 50?
yeah, I would say the same because the people I surrounded myself with.
What about you?
The question is, an average 25-year-old
Average
woman?
25-year-old woman,
Went to
how many
college.
sexual partners do you think they have by the time they're 25 years old in
25
United
That
States?
went to college.
That went to college. It was to keep it simple, right?
Average
or we can
okay.
say didn't go to college, whatever.
25-year-old woman in
25-year-old
America.
girl in the United States. This could go based off your peers.
You're saying 20
25
plus.
I mean, you've been around.
yeah,
You're saying 20
30
plus.
30 to 50.
She said 20
30 to 50.
I said 20 to 50.
Wow, I gotta
about
hear
you?
these
What do you
answers.
think?
Go ahead.
So, like I said, you can tell, like, the guy's like, really? Like, that much? So, keep in mind, the context of this conversation here is that they're trying to estimate how many women, 25, so we're talking about mid-20s here, how many guys have they slept with by 25? And these women believe that the average number is somewhere between 20 to 50 people. Now, we just read the stat, obviously, about what the numbers are if you slept with more than 10 people, and they're saying that by 25, you've already been through 20 to 50, and they think that that's normal. Keep in mind, they think that that's normal because the environment that these women hang around is that it is normal for women in their circles to sleep with a bunch of men. This is why they don't even question it when they say stuff like that. But I'll just continue just a little bit more here.
Well, from 3 to 10.
3 to 10? Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. That's fine.
No, I would say 10.
10? Okay.
3 to 10-ish, probably.
3 to 10. Okay.
7?
7?
Yeah, I'd say the average about 10.
Ladies, one more time. This is not you. I'm talking about your peers, girls you know, a conglomerate of all the females in your life that you've come across or you've known.
Yeah, I'm definitely not talking about myself.
Okay. You said what? 3 to 10? Okay.
Just say a number, guys. Yeah, this
35.
3 to 10 thing is
35.
like
35?
35.
25.
I've never even heard a girl admit 20. Not one single woman I've ever met in my entire life. We know girls under-exaggerate their numbers, though, right? 10 to 20, probably.
Okay.
Okay.
So I wanted to really sell off this point here just for a second, and I want to talk about just real quick the counter argument here, and this is something that a guy's going to make here in this video. Now, when he asks these people, like I said, they all think that the average number here is somewhere between like 20 to 50, right? That's what they think the average number for the women is. So when they ask these women the same question, well, should your partner have more sexual experience than you? this is the answer that they give.
Now, okay. Now, answers, let's go ahead and peg it around 20, right? Would it be fair to say 20 to 25 here? From everybody's answers, if I'm going to go ahead and average it out. So let's say it's around 20 to 25. Let me ask you this. For a relationship to last, who has to be more sexually experienced in a relationship, the man or the woman?
Man.
Okay, raise the hands if you think the man needs to be more sexually experienced for the relationship to work. Raise the hands nice and high. Nice and high. I want to see what the thing is. Okay, so that's the majority. Now, just out of curiosity, who thinks the woman needs to be more sexually experienced for the relationship to work? Raise the hands. Nobody? That's why.
So I want you to pay attention to what just happened here. It is the belief among these women that the average woman has slept with roughly 20 to 50 people by the time they're 25 years old. At the same time, they also believe that a man should have more sexual experience than them in order to be successful in a relationship. So these are women who have slept with 20, let's just say 25 for the sake of argument, 25 men. And they're expecting the men who they want to have something serious with to essentially have more sexual experience than them because they're not comfortable with having a relationship with a man who's had less sexual experience than them. So they're expecting you to have a body count of like 100 plus people essentially for them to be comfortable by comparison. This is essentially what we're doing here. Yeah, so male sluts are approved then. And it's not just with this group. Here's another group here. And this is women talking about how much men they've actually slept with. And the numbers don't get any better here.
Yes.
I have a very big body count and I'm very happy. And I'm in
what's
stable romantic arrangements.
What's the body count?
Probably like 300 something.
300 something. Okay. And you said 300.
Yeah, what about you guys?
Mine's at like 50.
50. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm also at 50.
50. Kiko, body count?
Men and women, or?
Let's separate them. What are the two?
Men, I'm pretty sure I'm at 5. Or sorry, men at 7, women at 5.
Stop the cap.
It's not what you said last time.
You know what's crazy? It actually is what I said last time.
And for the record, Duke made a great point here. These red pill guys are hypocrites. Do not take this as me supporting any of these red pill channels. Like, if you're someone like, Andrew Tate or whoever these guys are on this show, I think on the clip that I was going to show there, the guy was saying, and the only solution to this is that you got to go out there and sleep with more women. That's obviously not the solution. Clearly, it's not the solution here. But yeah, so don't take this as me defending any of these guys like whatsoever, because that's not the point of what we're doing here. I'm just trying to show you exactly how far we've digressed here in modern society here for a second.
Oh, you lied last time.
And I lied in not favor for me. So I said a number because I was like, I'm pretty sure it's around.
Just scoot into the table.
Wait, what did you say last time?
12.
Oh, Jesus, Kiko.
12. What did I do?
Hold on.
That's a total of 5 and 7 though, right?
Yes. And
that's
then
5 and 7 combined.
Yes, but I've slept with one more person or two. I've slept with 2 more people since then. I said 12 because I was pretty sure it was around 12, like the last time I counted, but it was actually at 10. So I literally, I guess, made myself sound a little worse than it was. Yeah.
Stop the cap.
All right, so 12 you said? 12,
yes.
Okay.
Total.
Okay, so 12, 50, 50, 300.
20.
20.
We're going to say
Yeah.
6.
Okay.
8.
All right. So, like I said, these are all women admitting to how many people they have slept with during this time period here. And like I said, some of you guys are just kind of like mind blown about this whole situation here at the moment. So Tax has heard 300 and his mind is absolutely exploded here. But let me jump in another woman's opinion here. I know we got our good buddy C.S. Johnson who's joining us here on the show. How you doing today, CJ?
Hey. Good. Sorry I'm late. Busy day today. But can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you were listening to any part of the show like beforehand, but we're kind of just talking about the way that, that sexual immorality has really just gone rampant here and in the last few decades, and it's not primarily just women, but it's gotten a lot worse with women over the course of the last 40 years. And here you have a bunch of women on the show talking about, their sexual past. Some women saying, "Oh, I slept with 300 men." Their panel believe that the average amount of men that women sleep with by the time they hit 25 is like 20 to 50 people, and they seem to think that this is just like a normal number. And we were talking about at the very beginning of this segment here about if you slept with more than 10 men as a woman, your chances of getting divorced are like almost 80%. So once that number hits 10, your chances of divorce are pretty much like a stone cold lock at this point, right? And these people are wondering why they're finding so much trouble with relationships, and we'll talk about exactly why that's important here. But I knew you have a little bit of insight of kind of this idea of our sexual, I guess, regressing over the last few years. What's kind of your take on it?
I think so. Like, sex is a very powerful source of energy, and if you don't contain it or constrain it, it's very destructive. And I think it goes without saying that society is pretty well destroyed. It's been wrecked a bit. So I don't know. It's not that profound, I guess. Yeah, I don't think you should sleep. I mean, like it says in the Bible, you should not do this stuff for very good reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Kate brings up a great point here. Not anti-red pill, but one gripe that I have is their expectation for women to be virgins, yet justify why it's okay to sleep with multiple women. That's just what Duke Nukem said. They are hypocrites, because if they weren't hypocrites, they will be trying to tell people, no, don't sleep with a bunch of people, both men and women, right? But it's this idea, and like we said, this other guy, he's like, well, the body counts on women are super high, so the only way to keep up and compete now is to sleep with a bunch of women, because that's the only way you're going to get women now. If you somehow are a bigger man whore than they are, right? That's kind of the idea here. And no, it's completely hypocritical. It's completely hypocritical, completely unbiblical at that point as well. You're not going to win anyone here.
Well, I mean, it is a symbol of our over hyper focusedness, I guess. Oh, yeah, sorry, my brain's shot today, but I mean, it's like a hypersensitive, like we've been laser focused on like this Marxist ideology, where basically you are basically the meat bag that your consciousness can control on some level, and that's it. And without your body, you're nothing. And this is why, like, so many people are like, body count this, body count that, and it's like, no, I do agree with Kate too. The red pill people, here's the thing is like, you can make good points about women and make stupid points about men at the same time.
Yeah.
So
it's like I said, it seems to be that this very, very illogical point of view is what we've essentially accepted as normal now, and it's been an absolute detriment to our society as a whole. Let me go ahead and bring up this last video, and this is kind of like just a summary of the things that we've talked about here throughout the course of the show, and just play this just really quick.
By the time the average woman is 30, based upon research that I've seen and just asking girls and whatever, even if she's attractive, okay, she's not Walmart golem, she's going to have a body count between 20 and 50 partners, okay? Yes, I know. Yeah, I know. Here's an
Yeah, so that's essentially like what's, I guess, estimated as normal now. And like I said, we were talking about beforehand how back in the 1970s, right at the heels of like the whole sexual revolution, like women who had only slept with one person their entire life, which was their husband, was almost 50%. I think it was like 43. And throughout the course of time, that has completely jumped. I think it's fallen to like nearly half to what that is now. I think only like 20% of women are essentially, the only person they've ever slept with is their husband. And yeah, that one was pretty low, but it was a short. So essentially, you guys read what he was saying there, that he believes that the average for women of that age is 20 to 50, which is the number that we keep hearing.
What are the
like over and
divorce
over again.
stats for men that have slept with more than 10 women? Out of curiosity.
I could look it up for you. I have to bring up that chart, but
I think
I'm pretty sure it hasn't been
more background on this.
Well, it's almost as if I had some more information to correlate the problem with men as well. So maybe you're just jumping a little too far ahead of me there, Sam.
I'm just jumping off of C.S. Johnson's point because she made a pretty fair point. I just like, why is the fixation on women and not society in general? Like,
Well,
we
you
acting
can
like
see-
the men ain't involved in this.
Yeah, you can see the damage to society though more thoroughly with women. I mean, I'll just say that right now, women are more emotionally in tune with themselves and comfortable expressing themselves emotionally, and that's why when you see all these goofy people around, you know, with all the stupid hashtags, most of them are women, so or they're on estrogen. So
not great. But no, not at all actually. So as I think Duke had mentioned, was it Duke or was it Tactics? Actually, I want to make sure I get this one correct here. No, it was actually Kate. So I was completely wrong. Kate had asked if the person in the thumbnail at the very beginning of the show was Dan Bilzerian, and yes, it is, because we're going to talk about the flip side of this problem and why it's a very serious problem right now. Now, if you haven't heard of the name Dan Bilzerian, this is a guy who has been popular on social media for many, many years, and it's because he's a guy who on social media flaunts the fact that he's always surrounded by, these women on these pictures and these videos that he's take. If you go on his Instagram account, it's literally nothing but him and like 15, like 20 women like at a time. He claims that they're not paid prostitutes, they're not paid models, that he sleeps with all these women and stuff like that. So he's been going a very, very big following over these last few years, because he's basically, let's put it this way, he's the picture of the male fantasy, which is a guy who can basically just go out there and sleep with as many women as he possibly can, and guys like look up to him because that's the lifestyle that they want, because that's essentially what our culture and our society promotes. And he has a very, very warped view of relationships. I'm going to let him explain in this little detail here about why he believes that men are not nearly successful as women are today, and this is what he believes in his mind. He believes, surprising, marriage is a trap, so he doesn't believe in marriage at all. And he says that the reason why men nowadays have almost appeared to giving up on dating is that I think they're being a little too a bit of desperate energy. This is Lauren who brought it in, and like I said, Bilzerian answered that question and says like that's what happens. It's like a snowball effect. First, you have a positive relationship, a girl likes you back, and you have sex with her. You suck at first, but you get better at it. Your confidence improves. All of a sudden, her friends want to bang you. Your confidence improves, and what happens? You go down this road where eventually you develop more and more confidence to your experience into this. Obviously, this is the picture here, what he posts on his social media account. So like I said, we were talking about envy just 2 weeks ago, about how the world brings envy. This is another example of it here, but he goes on to say that, but that's if but if your alternative is like, oh, this girl shot me down, I'm gonna go smoke weed, jerk off, play video games, and that's become your default setting, then where the F are you within a year if you do that for a year? Now he notes that at the year out of the game, people end up less confident and in worse shape, and it's like, where are you at? It gets progressively worse and worse, he says. At what point do these guys just give up after 2 years? And that's 2 more, so that's 2 years and 1 more day of not having sex, right? Like, it gets to a point where you just have a bunch of people in society that's withdrawn from the game. So his counter argument here is that because guys are not having as successful as sexual relationships within the world today, that's what's leading to people being unhappy and depressed, that people just aren't banging enough, especially men aren't banging enough. And you'll hear similar things, like I said, professed with Andrew Tate. I know Andrew Tate's been very popular about the things that he says about women, but obviously the advice that he gives to men is very, very detrimental to his other side of things. And this is where we're at kind of in society. I think I may have talked about this a little bit last week with kind of the dissension of men and women. Is that you have men and women who both ideologically are going 2 entirely different directions. You have women who are kind of progressing more liberal ideology of feminism, who are adhering to just go sleep with as many people as you want, and then sometime when you get older you can settle down and find yourself a guy, and then that's how you'll live your life. And then men are being told to be alpha chads and how they have to maneuver around the dating age today to sleep with more women and be more of a man, and their idea of masculinity is, like I said, sleeping with more women. all of this, one way or another, no matter how you look at it, is breeding more and more sexual immorality, and that's essentially where we're at the moment. And because of this, you've caused another problem, which has been a very, very big problem in our society. And I think the perfect example of this is OnlyFans. Now, we'll talk about porn here in a second, but that's kind of the obvious one. That's the one that everyone knows of. But there's been like this secondary avenue of the porn industry called OnlyFans. And essentially what this has become is now women who are just mildly popular on social media now, if they're mildly attractive, they just decide, hey, you know what? I'm just going to sell pictures and videos of myself on this OnlyFans gig, and a bunch of lonely, desperate men are going to pay me lots and lots of money to the point where I can make like $250,000 in like 1 month, because there's just so many desperate men out there who want to see me naked. And as a result of this, OnlyFans has now become a multi-billion-dollar company. So this is an article from I think a couple of months ago. OnlyFans users spent $5.6 billion on the porn-friendly creator site in 2022. So all of last year, people spent $5.6 billion on OnlyFans, up 16% from the year before. So what this means is you got a lot of desperate, down on their luck men who probably aren't sexually active or successful with women whatsoever, who are giving their income to women who are just deciding, well, you know what, I can make a bunch of money and go to OnlyFans and just show off my body for a bunch of cash. And this is the environment that we've created now. And you wonder why it's so divided between men and women. OnlyFans is a subscription platform that caters to sexually explicit content creators. Reported $5.5 billion in spending for the fiscal year ending in last November. That's up 16%. So this number is only going up. This is a UK-based company, a pre-non-tax profit of $525 million for the fiscal year. This is how much money they're making off this whole thing. OnlyFans owner, Leonid Radvisky, was paid $338 million in dividends for the fiscal 2022 year. That's up $284 million from the previous year. So congratulations, guys. This is where your money is going to. You're making this guy rich because you're so desperate to see women naked. OnlyFans has, keep in mind, they've made $5.5 billion off of roughly 3.1 million registered users, right? Which is obviously an increase of nearly 50% from what they had a year ago. So it's a small group of people, by and large, who are creating this overwhelming large financial market. And what this is doing as a result is that it's encouraging more men to go out there and spend money on OnlyFans, so that their only relationship with a woman is essentially through these porn sites. And then it's encouraging women to go out there because they're now financially motivated. And as we talked about in the very first episode of this series, with money, that's their main driver. It's like, hey, as long as I'm getting money, that's all that I care about. Some of you guys who are pro wrestling side of things, who follow me, you guys know the story about Mandy Rose. Mandy Rose was a WWE wrestler. She wrestled for NXT for over a year. She was the women's champion. And she decided all of a sudden that she was just going to make money on what they call fan time, which is basically just another OnlyFans knockoff. And the content that she was doing at the time became more and more explicit as time went. Somebody in WWE figured out what she was doing, and they took the belt off of her and fired her. And it should be a cautionary tale of, hey, don't do things that are going to affect your employment. She's been paraded around as like an example of a quote-unquote an empowered woman, because she's made over 6 figures a month off of a bunch of wrestling nerds who want to see her naked on her site. And like I said, she's gotten a whole bunch of money, and she's paraded around as the example. There's been a few other women within the pro wrestling atmosphere that has kind of followed her lead there, but this is an example of a much bigger problem. And talk about how sexual sin has separated our society from God. We're living in that right now. Like we were talking about earlier, Sodom and Gomorrah, the story about how God literally smited that town for the things that they were doing. I gotta be honest with you, our culture right now, especially here in the West, we're not that much better than Sodom and Gomorrah. If not, we're probably significantly worse, because all the things that they were doing then, we're doing now. And like I said, it's only gotten worse with time. So Yeah, like I said, and a lot of people were obviously against porn in a lot of ways, and I can't disagree with them at this point. I know the old libertarian side of this argument is always, let's let people do whatever they want to do as long as no one else is getting hurt. Well, obviously this is hurting men and women as the society in large. It's not just a victimless crime. We've literally divided men and women to the point where we can't even speak to one another anymore, and I'll talk about that here in a second. CJ, what's kind of your take on the whole OnlyFans explosion and kind of like the drive and like the porn industry in general?
The further a society drifts away from God, the more they'll look for pleasure in the most degenerative places. So I was kind of expecting this result when I first saw it happening a couple years ago. So I know, profound.
Sam, what's kind of your take on this whole thing?
Can you rephrase the question?
So obviously we just discussed OnlyFans and how OnlyFans is exploding now with men spending their hard-earned money desperately looking to see naked famous women online that are going on this, and how this whole porn I guess obsessed environment has really just destroyed the relationship between men and women that have driven everyone into sexual immorality.
Yeah. It's kind of tough because the women wouldn't be doing it if there wasn't a market for it. So there's an issue on both sides, right? Like, should women be doing it? Probably not. It's like a two-edged sword, right? The women wouldn't be doing it if there wasn't a market, but there wouldn't be a market if women weren't doing it. So
yeah. And this has been a debate that I've had with a few people. If you guys know, like Lofty Pixels and who's another guy who's been very, very prominent on this issue. I think it's like Raging Rhino and a few other guys. We're trying to figure out exactly where the blame of this whole thing should land, because there's been a very divided response about who the blame of this whole issue lies in. Now, I have no problem saying this. I've said this many times before. I do think that this is a male problem, largely, because at the end of the day, if there weren't so many desperate men out there spending all this money just to see naked women on the internet, obviously these women wouldn't have a market to go out there and essentially, spread their bodies, show their bodies on videos and these pictures and whatnot, and making all this money. So if there was no demand, obviously there wouldn't be a market. So I can completely understand this being a male problem. But then at the other side, like I said, our culture has become so porn obsessed, and it's not just with men, it's with women too. We'll get to that here in just a little bit here, but it's like, do you blame the men for essentially being in a position where they're looking around, they can't find a woman, so they just say like, well, porn is here and it's free, or for some people it's not free, and I'll just consume this rather than have a real relationship with women. And then of course women are affected as a result of this, because now they can't find guys suitable enough, or they're just going around from guy to guy and they're never actually developing a sense of relationship, a sense of commitment, because they're just having needless sex with one another. And you can see how this is causing a problem in our society right now. There's a reason why divorce rates are skyrocketing while birth rates are plummeting. Like, this is all a correlation in our society. And what we once thought was, oh, it's just porn, it's harmless, it's never going to hurt anybody. No, we're seeing the ramifications of this porn excess culture now, and it absolutely is affecting people. It is hurting our society, and you're seeing it, like I said, negatively affect both men and women now.
Yeah, I will say, like, the porn industry has, it really has damaged quite a few people, as far as like the expectations for sex and everything too. A lot of that goes into that. I will say, like, ideally, you would never have sex before you got married, because like the men are like the providers and women are the caretakers, right? So everybody has like a function in a relationship. And this is what I hate about feminism, is because they want the power, but not the responsibility necessarily behind it. Yeah. And I think, so I don't think it's a matter of who's to blame, because yeah, we're just all to blame at this point. But I do think that um, you know, if you issue a challenge to somebody, they will rise to meet it. So both of us should do better.
Yeah, and Don't Let Them Burn brings up a great point too. Like, there's a lot of people
Yes.
out there who claim to be against human trafficking, but they support the porn industry. Well, guess who's the biggest villain when it comes to human trafficking of both women and children in the world? It's usually the porn industry. So
Yes, and they have terrible records for consent on that too.
Mhm.
So I mean, like, even if you make the argument, well, they're consenting to it. Yes, sure, they're consenting to it. Are they? Are they really? Are they able to consent to the? Are they proper mind frame? I mean, like, we live in a generation where you could choose your gender at 4, but if you signed up for student loans at 18, you were somehow just unable to fathom the effect that that would have on your life. So this idea of like children being responsible for stuff or not being responsible for stuff should be very clear. They're not responsible for stuff. They cannot be responsible for stuff. And this idea that the things that you do when you're young, like if you sleep around, it won't affect your life. It will. It will. Those kinds of chickens always come home to roost. So
time and time again.
Yes. I don't think anybody should be supporting OnlyFans people. I think if you're on OnlyFans, the best thing I can say is tell someone that you trust and to like make them help you get off of your addiction, because this is, I mean, there's a reason that they say sex sells, and that's because of stuff like this. It's a very large magnet for trouble and attention of a specific kind. So, and I don't think, I will say, I don't think men and women are necessarily as divided as people say they are with this, because this is something that people can talk about. It is kind of like it is a hot topic at the moment, but it's also a topic that brings people together to if nothing else, for the sake of clarity, and exploring that can really open up a lot of good, like just good tangents, sideways paths, especially for early relationship building. I think like that's one of the nice things. Like when my husband and I were dating, we made it very clear, we weren't going to worry about certain things till we were married.
Yeah.
That helps a lot. When you have a supportive community too, that hey, you're not supposed to be alone together, or hey, just checking in, make sure the lights are on while you're watching this movie type stuff. It's embarrassing mom stuff now.
Yeah.
But it's helpful. Yeah.
And I will say this too, because, and we talked about this last week with like the MGTOW guys. Sam remembers this. It's like the MGTOW guys who are the ones who have gone. So they're basically like the other end of the extreme of feminism, right? They're the ones who have completely given up on any kind of relationship with women, and they hate women, and they blame women for all their problems. And a lot of people are under this impression that, well, if they just got laid, then that will solve like a lot of their issues. And I'm thinking to myself, is that really true? Because let's be honest here. I know there's a lot of guys who probably think this, but let's be real. Let's say that a guy who's can't get a woman because he's not good with women, whatever the case may be. Let's just say that person slept with a prostitute, and do not take this as me promoting prostitution, making a point here. If you were to just sleep with someone, is that going to solve any of your problems at the end of the day? Like, if you're someone who's frustrated that you can't have sex with a woman, if you just go out there and sleep with a woman, is that actually going to solve any of your problems? Or are you going to be right back to square one? Because if it doesn't solve anything, then you simply having sex is not the root of your problems, right? The root of your problems is something far, far bigger. And Kate made a good point earlier here, when she's talking about the emotional damage of porn. And it's emotional for both men and women. And we're going to talk about some of the specifics here in a second. But the reason why it's damaging for men emotionally is because people use porn as an outlet to find an emotional connection that they can't have with a real woman. So you see this with like OnlyFans, or you see this with like Twitch and some of these other outlets out there, that they'll go out there and they'll give money to a woman, or they'll, do OnlyFans or whatever the case may be. essentially think to yourself that, oh, well, I gave money to this woman, so she must know me, and then she must, like, that somehow we're developing a relationship, when really you're just someone who's giving her money, and then she's going to use that money to do God knows what with it. You don't really have a real connection with that person. On the flip side, there's a lot of women out there who have slept with God knows how many men, and they're still unhappy because they want to have that emotional connection with a man to say that, oh, this is my husband and he's the father of my kids and whatever the case may be. But they keep going from men to men to men to men to men, which is not helping them build any kind of emotional connection with a man. And they wonder why they have such a jaded view of men, because you're essentially just giving yourself up, giving your body to a man who only wants you for your body. And then once he's gotten what he's wanted, he's going to move on. He's never going to contact you again. So you think that, oh, I can go to the next guy and hopefully I can get that connection with him. And then that doesn't happen. So what does this cause here? It causes problems with men and women. Like I said, divorces are climbing because both men and women are unhappy with what they want or what they have. It causes problems in the homes. I mean, you have so many people out there who will get married, be completely unhappy. They think that, oh, well, if we have a kid, then this will solve our happiness problems. It doesn't solve their problems at all, because they never actually addressed what their emotional problems were. And now you're divorced. And so now you're going through alimony, you're going through child support, you're going through all these other things. And here's the thing, you're so worried about what you're getting out of the relationship and whether you're a man or a woman. Now you brought a kid into the world who's already being born into a broken home, who's already being brought into a world where the mother and father hate each other, they don't love each other. So they're going to start developing all the negative traits of both the mother and the father. And guess what? They're going to go out there, they're going to grow up into the world, and they're going to do the exact same thing. And the cycle repeats over and over and over again. There's a reason why,
and it gets progressively worse. So
yeah, because not only that, but then you start developing other problems because you're unhappy with your relationship. You start finding ways to cope about that relationship, which are drugs, which are alcohol. Sometimes it goes into violence and other things, and no one is happy as a result. And you just create this never-ending circle of misery, all because you were driven by your sexual desires and not driven by essentially any desires of God, and which is what we're talking about here in the course of the story, that all these things that separate you from God. When we talk about hell and the idea of hell is essentially internal separation from God, which means that it is a never-ending eternal misery. Why? Because you are separated completely from God's presence. And for a lot of people, it's because you live the life where you chose to be separated from the presence of God, and now you're getting what you wish by spending an eternity away from God. But the closer you are to God, the more that you are happy. And the reason why he's giving you these rules to live your life, because if you actually follow his word, if you actually follow his rules for happiness, then guess what? You're going to be significantly happy and significantly satisfied. That's why when you look at those same numbers that say that, well, if a woman sleeps with 10 men, then she's 80% likely to get a divorce. Well, guess what? If a man and woman, both men and women in this instance, if they get married to someone when they're both virgins, or at the very least, if only slept with 1 or 2 people, they're at the same opposite end of the spectrum, where you're 80% more likely to stay married as a result. And this is what we try to do. Talk to a lot of people about, and they scoff at this idea of, well, you know what, how about you just wait until you get married to start having sex with people? And they scoff at that idea. It's like, oh, that's not realistic, nobody does that anymore, and they don't want to hear it. So they go out there and, like I said, they'll have sex with as many people as they possibly can, and then when they hit 30 and 40, all of a sudden they realize they're not happy because they didn't do things the way they were supposed to. And it's like, okay, well, now I'm gonna live my life the way the church wanted me to begin with, so I'm gonna go out there and try to find a good godly man. And guess what? Because of your past, that godly person is probably not going to be associated with you. I'm going to put it this way. I can ask both men and women, if you're with a person who has slept with 25 people, just the number is 25, and that's pretty conservative given our time period right now. Would you want to date that person? Is that someone who you want to marry, someone who has been with more people than you can count on your hands and toes? Both men and women would largely say no. But in our culture right now, that's essentially what we're doing. We're promoting a culture that says go out there and sleep with as many people as you want, because at the end of the day, pleasure is more important than happiness. And it's the happiness that ends up killing you at the end of the day. This is why they said that sexual sin is in fact a deadly sin, because it will lead to death one way or another here. So
Yes.
I'll bring this up real quick, and then I'll go back to you guys here. This is some of the numbers here on porn addiction. And like I said, it's not just something that affects men. It affects a lot of women too. We just don't talk about women who struggle with porn. But it says pornography exists with 12% of all websites on the internet. 70% of American men have consumed porn or actively consume porn, and 40% of women consume porn as well. So like I said, this is not just a male issue. It is in larger numbers with men, but this is also something that women deal with as well. So it's not just a one-sided issue here. You have the public support and public opinion or pornography has increased among young adults over the last several years, meaning that it used to be taboo and looked down upon. Now it's just publicly accepted. Like, how many videos have you seen on social media where kids in like high school are doing the Pornhub theme song, and everyone's freaking out because all the kids know about the Pornhub theme song, because that's how adapted porn has become with the younger generation. And you're talking about the from that young, you can only imagine how it's like with the adults. One of the reasons the creation and circulation of porn is so lucrative by nature, it said it tracks a revenue. I said it matches a revenue more than the NCAA. So porn is actually drawing more money than collegiate and professional sports. Like that's how big the porn industry is. It's like $5.5 billion is an insane amount of money to make in 1 year. They'll talk about the NFL and the revenue that they make throughout the year. I mean, I think it's probably the only league that I could think of that even comes anywhere near that as far as like yearly revenue in the billions. But we've also seen that, pornography uses a decreased sex life satisfaction. Satisfaction. I don't know why I want to say satisfaction, but decreased sex life satisfaction and increasing desire for more rough and violent sex, and an increased chance of divorce. Because here's the thing: when you become addicted to pornography, to where you're just consuming it every single day, your sexual desires change too. And there's another point of this I wanted to scoop up with more of the LGBTQ angle of this, but essentially the idea is that the more and more you consume porn, the more and more that you watch pornography and you're not satisfied with what you're seeing, so you have to look for something more extreme to get that sexual thrill. And the next thing you know, you're going down such a dark path that it literally corrupts your entire brain and the way that you think. Like, people talk about like porn creating brain damage. It literally does create brain damage for people who are obsessed with it, because the only way that they can get sexual pleasure is through the extremities that only porn can give them. Because if you're in a normal relationship, a normal healthy sexual relationship, you're not getting these sexual over the top thrills that you would get in pornography, and that ends up killing your relationship, especially if you're married. It makes you divorced. Like we said earlier in the show, if you even look at a woman with lust in your eyes, you're committing adultery. So this is everything in our world is set up to, I guess, test the lust of your eyes, as we said here. And then real quick part here, adult performers have like challenging issues with mental and emotional well-being, eating disorders, depression, suicide, drug overdoses, financial struggles. These women, like I said, and this is the thing with OnlyFans, it's kind of the draw. It's like, oh, I can just do an OnlyFans and I can make 6 figures and go buy a brand new car and my life is going to be amazing. But guess what? That stigma of you being essentially a porn star, because you are, is going to stick with you for the rest of your life. And you're going to find out that less and less men who you want to date are not going to be associated by that. At the same time, for men, if you're trying to marry a woman and you're addicted to porn, guess what? The chances of that woman wanting anything to do with you is very slim to none, especially if you're dealing with an active porn addiction that has crippled your love life. So it's not beneficial to either men or women in this scenario here. And like I said, the research confirms that the negative consequences are far more than, hey, just get the bag and get a little bit of money and you'll be happy. Because guess what? You're not actually going to be happy. So I have one last video that we'll play before we wrap things up here, but just CJ, just kind of a summary of, like I said, the damage this is causing for both sexes here. Like I said, it's not just primarily a men issue, even though we're the ones that get lectured at the most, especially in church. But like I said, it's something that's really crippling relationships with both men and women, and there's another part to this I'll talk about on the last end here, but just kind of what are your thoughts on what we've gone through here with the porn industry?
I definitely think it's not helpful. I wish honestly they would ban it. I wish they would get rid of it. I know I tick off a few libertarians with that, but this is something that sex is always carried with it a lot of baggage, and feminism as an empowering force is true. Women do get a lot of power by having a lot of freedom of choices, but they can make bad choices, and women can make stupid choices. And this is not actually something that's empowering to share your body with the world and expect you to find fulfillment in it. A lot of people just with the women side of things, I found that a lot of women start watching porn because of their husbands. They start watching it together as like an activity. And the reason I think that they do this is, and they try to defend doing this, is because in the short term, it does give them some relief as to like, oh, this is what he or she is imagining. They have some kind of coming to moment where their alignments of what to expect versus the ideal that their partner is creating is in their mind works.
Yeah.
But I mean, like we've grown up in a generation where the short-term remedies have always been pushed in favor of long-term, more concrete and healthy solutions. I mean, even like you're saying, like how men feeling better if they just get laid. That might be true. I mean, people in general, if they get laid, they might feel better in the short term, but it won't actually do anything to address the underlying problems of their brokenness. And I found that a lot of people who are going from girl to girl or guy to guy, or increasingly doing stuff that's just even worse than that, a lot of them have these insecurities that are just poisonous to their hearts, and they have a lot of self-hatred. So
yeah,
I can't say that, like, I will say, like, I don't think there's any easy answer to get out of it. And I think you should have people in your life that you can trust, or find somebody that you can trust to give you a good starting point to get out of sexual sin. Because it is something that it can cause such heartache, and it's not just for you. Like, actually, like a while ago, that Bridget Fagety lady, I don't know how to say her name, but she came out with this note of like how she'd learned the hard way finally, like after she like had all these affairs and stuff with men, that like she finally came to realize that like it was a privilege to sleep with her, and that she should only give it to somebody that really loves her. And I saw a lot of people like cheering her on and stuff, and it's like, yeah, good. But like, how many men's lives did you like break too in the process of breaking your own further? So, I mean, like, if this is like a social justice matter, this should be something that, like, if you really want to make the world a better place, you will work on making sure that you're not damaged and you're not damaging anybody else either.
Mm-hmm. And Sam, let me ask you this question. What is your experience with, I guess, dealing with people like kind of in your sphere who have struggled with sexual sin? But you could be both men and women. Maybe if you have a female perspective on this, it would be good to know, because I feel that it's one that's definitely embarrassing for a lot of people, so they don't generally talk about it. But have you seen or dealt with anyone who has specifically struggled with this, and kind of what's your take, and what would be your advice to that person, kind of from a Christian perspective?
Yeah, so I had a friend, or I actually ended up dropping a friend because, and I'm going to go ahead and assume she's not going to watch this podcast, so I'll speak freely. Though if she did, she'd know who she was. I couldn't go into any social situation with her without her looking for somebody to sleep with. If I expressed that I was interested in somebody or that I thought somebody was attractive, she would always like pursue that person. At one point, she told somebody that I told her I thought was attractive, like, oh, like she ended up taking him home and being like, oh, me and Sam were in a contest to see who could sleep with you. I'm like, girl, do not put that on my name. Do that. So it was just a lot of things like that. She had an OnlyFans, and I think it's a spirit that would, like, the more you open yourself up to that, the more you start to behave like that. It's, you know.
Yeah.
That's my experience. That's the worst that I've ever seen. And it was to a point where I was like, you know, I can't be with her without people commenting on it, or like without this being kind of like the like focal point of our hanging out is you looking for somebody to sleep with. And in a lot of ways I feel bad for her, because I feel like she was always searching for something. She's always searching for a relationship. She was very disappointed a lot of times because of that. You know, it's hard. Like, I don't wish that kind of life on anybody. And I think that was just kind of how that she felt a connection with people. But it's to a point where it's like, you know, if it's to that degree, it starts affecting your friendships, it starts affecting other things in your life. It's like, that's not a habit, that's an addiction. And I think that women who are that far gone kind of have that, you know? So it's a really sad thing. Like, I don't wish any ill will on her, anybody who's like that, but it's a cycle you really have to break. And kind of like CJ was saying, you really have to take a step back, ask yourself what you're doing, and think, and not let your damaged self cause damage to other people, because like she was saying, is how many people's lives did that influence?
It's a very, very tough thing, because I know there's a lot of guys, like I said, a lot of women out there who know that they're dealing with this problem, but find it very, very hard to separate themselves from this problem. So if you're asking, like, what's like the best guy, I mean, look, if you just look at the world and the way that the world's set up, like, it's everywhere. Like the sexual temptation is basically just everywhere. Like, we grew up in the 90s, obviously. So in the 90s, we saw all kinds of, television shows and movies where, like I said, the kind of that sexual temptation was just like thrown in our faces. If you heard of a UFC fighter who's the middleweight champion right now, Sean Strickland, talks about this too. And he was saying that, I grew up during the same, era that, all these other guys grew up when. I was porn obsessed. I was obsessed with the culture because that's just the way that, I grew up in. I didn't have a good family and whatnot, but I look back on it now and I just see like how like sick and depraved that it all is, because like I said, at the time you can definitely convince yourself that this is normal when this is just all that you see. And for a lot of guys and girls, this is normal, because you just look everywhere. You're seeing, like I said, OnlyFans being popularized throughout the entire world now, about women joining OnlyFans, and men are giving money to the women through the OnlyFans thing. And obviously porn is another thing. But even if you're not looking for pornography content, like I said, it's still in the music that you listen to. It's still in the movies that you watch, and on the television shows that you watch. If you're on the internet in any way, shape, or form, you're going to see it. If you're on Twitter, especially if you're on like Instagram and all these other social media platforms, I mean, you can't even go to Twitch anymore. When I was saying Twitch is supposed to be like a gamer deal too, but if you go on Twitch, this is what you'll see on Twitch right now. And there's like several other girls on here that are like this specifically now, and people have literally turned Twitch, a gaming platform, into essentially like Pornhub. That's essentially what it is now. So you go there, it's in your face. You go to, like I said, you just turn around, you can't really escape it. So I think a good question for a lot of people is that, how do you escape this? If you truly genuinely want to get out of this culture, how do you remove yourself from it? I'm gonna play this video here because this is actually a very good and informative video here from Vody Bakum. We play him a lot when we do the outro of this show, but he kind of talks about the problem. And look, the first step, I know it sounds cliche, the first step of fighting a problem is realizing that you have one to begin with. So let's just go ahead and just play this here, and he'll talk to you. Right?
When I encounter young men or young women who are struggling with pornography, and I think one of our greatest mistakes is that we talk about pornography only in terms of young men. There are young women who struggle with pornography, not in the same way, not in the same numbers, but it's real. We live in a pornographic culture. And that's one of the things that makes it very difficult to deal with pornography. We've been so inundated with pornography that we're desensitized to pornography. And that line at which we will say that's pornographic has been drawn so far out into the realm of the inappropriate that we have people who dress pornographically and they're not bothered by it and we're not bothered by it anymore. So one thing that I say to people in this area is that we need to recognize that we are living in a pornographic culture. And the reason I say that is because part of dealing with the roots of pornography are acknowledging the fact that we have been desensitized to it and acknowledging the fact that my problem with pornography, let's say that there's a pornography scale of 1 to 10, and 10 is, you know, full on, you know, I'm engaging in, you know, the worst examples and extremes of pornography. Well, I think culturally, we probably live every day around a 3 or 4, just in commercials, and just in, you know, and just in the things that we become desensitized to. And so, if I'm living at a 3 or 4 and a 5 or a 6 really doesn't bother me anymore, then when I get to a 9, my goal in dealing with somebody who's at a 9 is not to say, come back to a 5 or 6. My goal with them is to say, I want you to recognize not just that this is an issue, but that even those things that are down here in the areas that we're not even bothered by are issues. Not so that the person becomes, you know, just afraid of looking around, but so that the person becomes aware of their need for Christ to cleanse their minds, not just of the website where I'm watching pornographic sex, but also of my lack of sensitivity to those everyday examples of pornography that are around me, because to the degree that I go on accepting them and am no longer bothered by them, to that degree, I'm setting myself up so that the leap from that 5 to that 9 is a very short leap. And it's not just so that I won't leap over into the worst of pornography, but it's so that I can understand the dignity inherent in human beings made in the image of God, and how my embrace of a pornographic understanding of my fellow man, my fellow woman, is the embrace of the destruction of their dignity. So that if I see a young woman who is presenting herself in a pornographic way, and that's not bothering me, I've just said something about the dignity of that woman as made in the image of Christ. And until that becomes an issue for me, not in the sense of walking around, you know, sort of with my eyes, you know, blocked off, but in the sense of appropriating God's grace and asking Him to appropriate that grace in me, even at that level. Until I'm there, I'm not really dealing with this issue of pornography. And ultimately, when I come down to it, not only is it that issue of the inherent dignity and value of human beings made in the image of God, the not defrauding my brother and my sister, but also this idolatry of believing that it's okay to use another human being in order to gratify myself in any way, sexual or otherwise. So what I want to do, and I know that's a long way around, but what I want to do when dealing with this issue of pornography is I want to uproot and uncover all of that, so that we can not just have this sort of legalistic response to, I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to put things in place so that I don't do that anymore, but so that we have a response that goes all the way back to the cleansing of our minds, to be able to appreciate one another as being made in the image of God, and not just accepting this ordinary pornographic predisposition that has become so normal.
So I want to just kind of summarize like what he says here, and this is, like I said right before I played this video, if you want to beat this sin, you have to first accept that you have a problem with this sin to begin with. Because, I mean, if you don't accept that you have a problem, you're not going to get rid of it. I'm going to go back to a verse that we did earlier tonight, Galatians 5, 19 through 21. And 19 is very, very important here because it's talking about the works of the flesh. It talks about adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness. These are all sexual sins. All four of those that I just read are all sexual sins. And it's very, very important to read off why those are the first four that are mentioned here, because you're talking about the biggest sins that you could commit. You talk about, well, what about murder? What about stealing? These four sins, sexual sins in general, are sins that you don't commit against other people. They're sins you commit against yourself. And you always hear like this counter argument of, well, they're not hurting anyone, so like what's the big deal? You are hurting someone. You're hurting yourself. You're damaging yourself because, I mean, you're pretty much corrupting your entire soul by doing this. And like I said, this was the verse right here that convicted me. This is why I go back to it so much because, like I said, it's very easy to go around and think to yourself that, I'm a pretty good person. I've done pretty good things like in my life. I helped that one lady across the street that one time. I gave the homeless person $1. I'm a good guy. And then you read this verse and then you realize, no, actually, you're not that good of a guy. You're actually not that good of a person. So once you accepted this and then obviously come to Jesus Christ, because I mean, if you really want to get help, that's kind of the way you have to do it. But if you're asking yourself, what exactly can I do to break this sin? It's what Jesus said earlier in the show. If your eye is causing you to sin, rip it out. Get rid of it. Now, if you're not in a position where you can literally gouge out your eye, what do you have to do? You have to start taking the things that are causing you to fall, that are causing you to sin, and remove them for your life. If you have movies that have very, very suggestive themes in the movies and you don't want to like be involved in those type of sin anymore, get rid of the movies. Just get rid of them. If you have music that have very, very suggestive themes, and we all know some of the music that's out today are very, very suggestive, get rid of those. If you have, like I said, TV shows, DVDs, get rid of all that stuff. If you have porn on your laptop, get rid of it. If you can't handle the type of women that are on Instagram this day, get rid of the app. Just delete the app altogether. You have to take the effort to remove these things out of your life. To, first of all, realize what is causing you to fall, remove those things out of your life, and then learn to move forward. Because only once you've removed those things out of your life, and like I think it was Don't Let Them Burn here said earlier, replace them with the Word of God. Take all that time that you were devoting to pornography and suggestive images and naked women and all that stuff, and devote that time to God and refresh your mind. When you refresh your mind with the Word of God and you start to understand things a little bit more clearly, and you start to understand exactly how the world is built and set up to remove you from God, it becomes a lot easier to resist the temptations that you were struggling with beforehand. Because all of a sudden, if your mind is renewed and your whole line of thinking is removed, you're not even seeking the same things that you were seeking like before. Like, there's movies and shows and stuff like that I used to watch all the time back then, and I play them now, and it's like I can't watch the same stuff anymore because my mind knows that, no, I know that this stuff is bad now. Like, I can't consume it the same way that I consumed it years ago before, I came to Christ, before I knew God and all that stuff. You can't look at the things the same way once you realize just how harmful they are. Like, I make this analogy, I think, last week on the Ballroom podcast. Once you start to see, like, let's say rap music, for instance, once you start to see how damaging rap music really is, once you really start listening to what the words are saying, what they're promoting, it's like, oh yeah, it's talking about killing people and sleeping with people and stealing and worshiping money. It's like, I can't really enjoy this anymore. I just turned it off. That's the way that you're going to have to do it, because if you try to do it any other way, you're essentially going to delay the inevitable. You're going to continue to fall over and over again. It's going to be tougher and tougher for you to beat these sins without the assistance of God. You can try to do it on your own. I know there's a bunch of communities out there who try to fight this thing. I know there's like a big community on Reddit called NoFlap, and essentially it's trying to help people break away from the sins of like I said, pornography, masturbation, and all that stuff, and they're trying to break away from those practices. For some people, it's successful. Some people, they're still struggling, trying to get over that hump. I can't tell you how long it takes to break that thing. I know for some people they were like, hey, look, once I read the word and I saw that this was bad, it's like I got rid of it altogether, and then that was done. For other people, it's like I'm getting better at it. I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I'm still struggling. Like I can't sit here and tell you everyone's gonna have the same reaction, because everyone struggles with this in completely different ways. But this is really the playbook that you're gonna have to use here. You have to get serious about your problem, understand you have a problem, and you have to actively and aggressively fight for a solution here. And that's really the only way that you're gonna see this, because look, the world is consumed with sexual immorality and sexual sin. But once you know God, and once you're smart to the world and smart to the word, even when that stuff is presented to you, you're gonna want to flee from it, because you know exactly how bad it is. And the more and more you renew your mind, the less you're gonna want to be involved with anything that's going to separate you from God at the end of the day. That's the best advice that I can give you from a situation like this. And I'll go ahead and wrap it up with you two guys. Johnson, do you think that's sound advice? Do you think there's anything that you want to add there? I'll start with you, then I'll go to Sam.
So what I think it's good advice. I definitely think admitting that you have a problem is a good place to start, because I mean, awareness is like the first step to like a problem well stated is a problem half solved.
Yeah.
But the other side of it, I would encourage people to think about the alternative. You know, like I understand that, you know, it can be very daunting to like look at life and look at all that you have to do and all this potential suffering that you will have to go through, and to not feel like it's not going to be worth it in the end. But I mean, like I can say, you know, very certainly that like, yes, this is worth it. It is, you know, I've been married for about 15 years now, and I've been with my husband for about, we started dating when I was, so it's probably about 17 years that we've been like a couple. And I can say, like, in all the time, it's just nice that I have somebody that is just for me.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that like you don't get if you're so busy spreading yourself thin over so many people. You don't get to enjoy the inside jokes and the ongoing, you know, sort of dance that you share with a person that knows you. And you know, like our kids are here, and I've talked to them about how I know them so well that I can read their mind with just one look. And you know what? About 90% of the time I'm right. And a lot of the times with that, you know, like you can just, it's so much nicer, you know, than having to worry about, you know, am I thin enough? Am I pretty enough? Am I smart enough? Am I charming enough? You know, am I going to finally measure up to what this person wants me to be so I can be happy with myself? I think that's something that people just desperately want, but you have to also realize that you're like this broken person before God. And I think when you have that realization that you're broken and this other person is broken, but you guys can kind of build off of each other to become a better people and to become better followers of the Word of God. You know, it's got the vision, it's got the values, and it's got that very deep relationship that makes forsaking all this other stuff worth it. I never want, I mean, like I used to joke that I'd probably run my husband into the grave early because I'm so demanding.
Yeah.
And you know what? In the last couple of years, I've stopped joking about that because I'm like, you know what? I asked first when I told him when we got married, I'd take care of him for the first 7 years because he was getting his master's degree and stuff at the time. And so I'll take care of the bills for the first 7.5, then you take care of me for the next 70. And now I'm like, I just want more than that. You know, time is my enemy now. You know,
And
I only get so much of it with him.
I will make this quick little point too, and obviously with one of the verses that we read a little bit earlier, especially when it comes to marriage, like it really focuses on it puts emphasis on the fact that married couples should in fact pray and fast together, and it's really this idea that look, men and women are going to come into a relationship with a different set of problems, or some of you guys might have similar problems, who knows. But the idea is that when you're married and you're, like I said, you have a husband and you have a wife, you're supposed to essentially rely on God and assist each other in each other's problems. That's kind of the whole idea of marriage in the first place, that you have someone to rely on. And I know, like, in the modern society, especially with these manosphere guys and like other people, they like to talk about, oh, if you're a man, don't cry in front of your woman because then she won't respect you and she's gonna leave. It's like, look, I get it, don't be like a blubbering idiot all the time, but this idea that you can't come with any problems and you can't come to your wife to like any of your problems, and it's like, if you can't trust your wife with what you're dealing with, then who exactly are you supposed to trust? Like, you guys are supposed to be there for each other. The whole idea of you're supposed to, like I said, come together to be one flesh, to be like one person. So if your wife is struggling with something, she's gonna want to rely on you to be there for her, to help her out through her toughest times. Conversely, if your husband's going through something tough, he's going to rely on his wife to be there to have his back and get him through tough time as well. It's like, not all of marriage is a happy fun joy every single day. Like, you're going to go through struggles. That's just the way that life is. But the whole idea is that you're supposed to be there for one another during their toughest times. This is why they say for sickness and in health and death. I mean, like, that's kind of the idea that, hey, look, you're going to go through trials and tribulations, but you're supposed to go through it together so that you can pursue together at the end of the day. Sam, I'll let you go through your final thoughts here real quick on just everything we just ran down here on the whole deal of sexual immorality and lust. You're muted, by the way.
You're still muted.
Haha! Check out that. This is something that I wish I'd said a little bit earlier. I don't want to approach this conversation from the angle of condemnation. One of the things that I think about is the story about the woman at the well, where Jesus comes to the woman and he tells her, I know everything you've ever done. You've had 5 husbands. Read between the lines on that one. She's probably slept with at least 5 men, if not more. I'm not.
No, that was back in those times.
That was like the equivalent of like 500 men,
Yeah.
One for every 100. Yeah, I mean, Jesus saw that and he was just like, hey, I love you. And I see you through that. And then with the woman who was about to be stoned, she was an adulteress and he was like, go forth and sin no more. And that's the heart of who Jesus is. If you're somebody who has struggled with this or who is struggling with this, whether it's pornography, whether it's sleeping around, whether it's any of the above topics that we've talked about, there is hope for you. There's salvation in Jesus Christ. He takes that away from you like it never happened. And that's the freedom that comes with being in Jesus Christ. He doesn't look at you by that sin. He doesn't say you did this, that's it for you, you're screwed. He calls you out of it. So that's really my final thought. You can still have everything that's on the other side of that. Jesus loves you. And yeah, don't feel condemned.
I got my only pushback to that. I'm not saying that it's a bad message at all, but like I said, it just goes back to kind of what we were saying here. It's like a lot of people who get to a point where they're going to need Jesus or they're going to seek Jesus, you got to have to also accept the fact that, hey, I clearly have a problem and I'm looking for a solution. So people who are seeking a solution are usually going to, like I said, find that's where they're in the point in their life where they end up finding Jesus, where it's like, there's something in my life that I can't deal with on my own and I need somebody there to help me. And that's where the love of God comes in, because you don't want a lot too many people out there, I think, are kind of in like a mindset of like I was saying before earlier, that hey, I'm a good person, I'm fine, so it's like, what do I need help for, essentially, right? They kind of convince themselves that I don't steal, I never lied, I don't murder anyone, so I'm good, right? And that's kind of not exactly how it works. I understand, don't want it to be like a victim. Here's the thing. You shouldn't there's a perfect way to put it. You shouldn't feel like you're sins are like beating you over the head. Like, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of people have dealt with things in their past that they're not proud of, that they wish they can take back. And you don't want to put people in a position where you're just beating those past sins over their head over and over and over again, because that is not productive whatsoever. But like I said, you want to at least get them to a point where they're like, okay, I know I've done wrong like in my life, and now I need to take the steps to correct that and get away from that. And that's where the love of God comes in, because he's saying that, look, I know what you've done, I know your sins, and I'm here to say that I'm here to save you regardless of your sins. I'm here to love you regardless of your sins. And that's when we bring them in. So
yeah, and I think we're saying the same thing, which is ultimately, I mean, and there's a point with that where it's empty, whether you're a guy or a girl, it's empty. And that's where you can be called out of that. You know, some people dig themselves deeper into that hole. There's like, I heard somebody say once, sin wants to kill you. It's never just one more time. It's never just the same things. You're always like, your lusts are always growing. Your preferences are always growing. They're always getting deeper. They're always getting darker. Yep. And at the end of that, you have to look for a way out. So that's where Jesus picks up the phone and says, homie, I'm calling you. Pick up.
Yeah. Well, in part of what I liked about the Vodi Bakum video that you were playing, Jacob, is that it gives you a new perspective on how you should view people. A lot of cultural influence comes into people as like, you have to be productive or useful, or you have to have money, or you have to be pretty enough. You know, like there's ways that we judge the value of a person based on what they look like and what they can offer. And Jesus doesn't really do that. Like, you know, we're all born with that image of God in it. And, you know, like this idea that, you know, like he says, when you start to realize that women are degrading themselves by, you know, throwing their pearls before swine, you know, and men are acting like buffoons and causing themselves only further pain, trying to find some small little bit of pleasure. You know, like that's a powerful thing to realize, is that this is your brother, this is your sister, this is somebody that you know, that you need to love, and you need to love them enough to tell them, hey, you look like, you know, you're doing this terrible thing to yourself. So, and that's not always easy, and this is where people don't like to hear the truth.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and that's kind of like a real quick, it's just like the big takeaway of when Jesus says love your neighbor and love your enemy, right? And it's the idea that, well, how do you love your enemy? How can you love someone that you are clearly at odds with? You may even despise that person. For me, it's really just realizing that, hey, look, at the end of the day, there's two sides. You're either with Christ or you're not. That's just the way that it is. A lot of people can stipulate that any way they want to. It's two sides. You're either with Jesus Christ or you're not. But the reality is that the people who are against Christ only have one destination. And it's not a fun destination. And it shouldn't be a place that we should be happy that anyone's going. Even though, look, I know there's some pretty wicked people out there in the world who have done some, let's say, unspeakable evils, to the point that stuff that we're talking about here is even far surpassed that. I get that. But at the end of the day, it's like, you don't want to see someone end up in the broad path of destruction, which is the idea of loving your enemy, is that you want them to break through. You want them to be saved at the end of the day. You want to do everything in your power that you can do to make sure that they're on the right path, so that one day your enemy will no longer be your enemy, but they'll actually be your friend. Because at the end of the day, look, we're all trying to get to heaven. We're all on the path of being saved. We're all saved here. But look, at the end of the day, when we get there, we're all going to be friends, and there's going to be no dissension. There's going to be no discord. None of that stuff is going to exist. You want everyone to be there with you. You don't just want to be there like by yourself. And there's people out there, like, look, I know there's people going through some tough times with trying to save their family and trying to like hold that weight of, well, if I don't do it, then no one's going to do it. You got to understand that, like, at the end of the day, God's in control here. So we want everyone to be in the right place. We don't want anyone to be conceived, whether it's through their personal sins, through the sins of the world, and the deceptions that there are just so many out there. We talked about the last 3 weeks. I mean, in 3 weeks, we've talked about the sin of worshiping money, the sin of envy, the sin of discord and hatred, lust, and sexual immorality. And you think to yourself, man, if we really start looking at the world, like it truly is just a wicked, wicked place. And how do we counteract that? How do we overcome that? And we have to find people who are struggling with these sins and come to them with love to bring them back to the right side. I mean, like I said here, the whole context of the sheep. If one sheep gets lost, you go after him to bring him back. That's kind of the whole idea of why we're doing this in the first place. So there's one more sin that we'll talk about here. We're going to wrap up this series next week. And this is a sin that I think everyone in one way, shape, or form has committed, whether knowingly or unknowingly to a different degree, but it's one that is absolutely plaguing our society right now, and it has plagued our world from the very beginning. This is something that you can say is probably the worst of all sins. There's a reason why the very first commandment is, thou shalt not have any other gods before me, and there's a reason why that's number one. It's almost like our First Amendment, and we're going to talk about the sin of idolatry, because there are a lot of forms of idolatry out there. Some direct forms of idolatry where you're straight up worshiping other gods that are not God, to the point of you're so obsessed with certain things that you've treated this thing as your God. For some people, porn is their God. For some people, Beyonce is their God. For some people, the Dallas Cowboys are their God. There's a lot of ways to form idolatry in the world, and we'll talk about that as we wrap up our series next Monday night. Part 4 will be on the sin of idolatry. And then I know a lot of people, we didn't really talk about this, but obviously everyone's talking about this, the whole conflict with Israel and Palestine and the whole war going on with them. And I know this is going to be a hot button issue here the next couple of weeks. In 2 weeks, we will talk about this. We're not talking about this now because we want to wrap up the series first before we go on to this, but we will talk about this in a couple of weeks. So 2 weeks from now, we will cover the whole Israel-Palestine conflict, especially from a Christian perspective. I think it's very important to tackle this from a Christian perspective, because you look at, obviously, Palestine, not exactly friends to the gospel. You look at Israel, as we talked about the last couple of weeks, they're not exactly friends of the gospel either. So which way should we lie on this whole situation? We'll talk about that more in depth in 2 weeks, but we will talk about it. But I want to go ahead and thank my guests for joining us here tonight. CJ, obviously, Sam. So I know it's getting late for you guys. It's almost 10 o'clock, and that's basically like 2 a.m. for some of you older ladies. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you guys the floor here. Let you guys promote what you got coming up. I'll start with you, CJ.
Can you start with Sam first? I'll get links.
No, because then she's going to tell me to start with you. Neither one of you guys are prepared.
I didn't actually think I could. Okay, so there is actually like one book of mine I wanted to talk about.
Okay, we'll shoot it back over to Sam now, and then Sam, what do you got coming up? What do you want people to know about?
I'm on TikTok. Have not made a ton of new videos lately, but y'all can go follow me. I'll work on that. It's Sam Got a TikTok. Exactly how it sounds. I got to change that name, but if y'all want to see some good old Christian content, it's on there.
All right then.
Well, I admire you for being a missionary to the TikTok world.
Because
I do what I can.
Yep. So, but everyone, I'm C.S. Johnson, and I write books. And since we were talking about like reframing things and like refocusing on on how you see things, one of my book series, which has a freebie book in it today, is called "Till Human Voices Wake Us." And Jacob has the link, I think, in the private chat if you want to go pick it up. But yeah, it's probably my most disturbing book, and I'm very proud of it. So so go read it, and how you see people in life and so much determines how you interact with them a lot of the time. So let me put it like this: it's not going to be like the worst thing that you ever read. So Tess of the Duvervilles still is in print. So
that is one heck of a selling point. It's not as bad as all the other stuff you read. So
yes.
All And then I'll shoot it back over here, let you guys know what we got coming up on the channel this week. Last Friday night, me, Rob, Sider, and Rick did a movie night for Can't Hardly Wait, the 1998 film with Jennifer Love Hewitt. It's actually our highest viewed movie night ever. On the site. It's on our Rumble account right now, so if you guys haven't subscribed to Rumble yet, go do that at the moment, because I said it's been a pretty big one that we did last night, and it was really fun. I'll talk about the movie we're going to watch this week. Letting you guys know what we got tomorrow night on the Ballroom Podcast is episode 69, and yes, I do know the irony of episode 69 when we're talking about lust and sexual immorality here, but Brad Shepard is going to join us on the show tomorrow night. He's going to talk about some pro wrestling news with us. So he'll be on the show tomorrow night to talk about, the WWE deal with Monday Night Raw, the WWE deal with NXT, and some other things that are going on at the moment. So we'll talk about that and some other salacious news behind the scenes at the locker room over at the WWE and AEW. So it'll be a pretty interesting show tomorrow night. We're also going to talk about ESPN doubling down on not focusing on sports. There's this new blasphemous gay movie that's out there that predicts God and Lucifer in a sexual relationship. We'll talk about that as well. So tomorrow's going to be a very interesting show. So join us there tomorrow night, 9 p.m. for the Ballroom Podcast. This Friday night, I should say, we're going to do another movie night, and we're going to be watching the 2000 film Bring It On with Kirsten Dunst, Eliza Dushku, and Gabrielle Union. We'll talk about that film and a couple other stories on our Friday night show. Like I said, we're going to do same thing that we did last week. First 30 minutes is going to be here on YouTube, and then we're going to switch over exclusively to Rumble and on to Twitch. So we're going to do the same thing this week with Bring It On, so go check that out. And then, like I said, next Monday night here on the show, we're going to be wrapping up our Do Not Love the World series, and we're going to be talking about the sin of idolatry, and that's going to be a very good one. So to everyone who joined us here, obviously my panel here as well, to everyone who gave great insight, like honestly, all of you guys killed it like tonight who are in the chat tonight. You guys could bring up some great points, some great discussions. So Kate, obviously, Duke Nukem, Don't Let Them Burn, Alex vs. Evil, Tactus Jones, Truth, who also joined us here tonight. Awesome one. Did a good job here tonight as well. And I want to make sure I got everyone. I think I did. So yeah, all of you guys were great tonight. You absolutely killed it. Hopefully we'll see you guys either tomorrow night, if not tomorrow night, Friday night for movie night, if not Friday night, next Monday night back here at the same time. So we're going to go ahead and end the show the same way we end all of our shows, with the Gospel of Jesus Christ from Vodi Bakum. So until then, see you guys later. Adios. Do the British wave.
When people say, no, our problem is this, our problem is that, we say, no. Our problem is that God created the world. And God created man, and he put man in the garden to keep the garden. And he gave the man a command. And he held that man to perfect, perpetual obedience to that command. And he promised him life if he kept it, and death if he didn't. And he didn't keep it. He ate. And because he ate, because of that one man, sin entered the world, and death through sin. And everyone born from that man through ordinary generation inherited that man's sin nature. And because of that sin nature, sins proceed from it. And our world is broken because of that sin. And we stand guilty before a holy and righteous God. And we know that he's holy, and we know that he's righteous, and we crave justice. But the problem is that if God gives us justice, we all die. And so that God, in his goodness and in his mercy, sent forth his son, who was not born of ordinary generation, but was born of a virgin. Yes, the virgin birth matters. Why? Because if he's born of ordinary generation, he's born in sin. But because he's not born of ordinary generation, he's not born in sin. He's clean of sin. His record is clean. And he keeps his record clean. And he obeys God's law. And because he's fully God and fully man, he obeys the law of God on our behalf in his active obedience. And then in his passive obedience, God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. All we like sheep had gone astray.
Each of us had turned to his own way, but God laid upon him the iniquity of us all. And Christ died for sin once for all, the just for the unjust. And God imputes our sinfulness to him. And he nails our sinfulness to the tree. And Christ dies and raises again on the third day for our justification. And there's another imputation. The righteousness of Christ is actually imputed to us so that God can be both just and the justifier of the one who places faith in Jesus Christ, so that all those who come to Christ may enter in, so that all those who place faith in Christ might be saved, but not only saved, but sanctified, because he's the firstborn of many brethren. We're justified and we're adopted into the family of God, and we're sanctified, and as his children we begin to bear the family resemblance, and we're further sanctified throughout this life by the very same gospel that saves us, until one day when it's all said and done, we're not just saved from the penalty of sin, we're not just saved from the power of sin, but one day we're glorified and saved from the very presence of sin. That's the gospel that we preach. That's the gospel that we need. And that's the gospel that's more than enough.